What would you do if you got a mysterious message about an adventure? Jane followed the clues and unlocked a secret world. Join her on a journey where every step could change everything. Are you ready to find out what happens next? It was a regular Tuesday morning. Jane was sitting in her cozy kitchen, sipping on her warm coffee, and scrolling through her phone when she noticed something strange. A new text message appeared from an unknown number. Jane looked at the screen with confusion. The message said, "You've been chosen for an adventure. Ready?" Adventure? Jane thought. Who is this? What kind of adventure? She wasn't sure if this was a prank or something serious, but her curiosity was stronger than her hesitation. Jane typed a quick response. What do you mean? She put her phone down and waited, thinking this was probably just some random message. But within a minute, another text arrived. The message read, "Meet me at the park at 3 p.m. I'll be waiting. Don't forget." Now, Jane's heart raced. Was this real? Should she go? Who would invite her on an adventure like this? Her thoughts raced in every direction, but in the end, her curiosity won. Okay, she decided. I'll go. It'll probably be just a silly joke, but it could also be fun. She spent the rest of the morning in a haze of excitement and confusion, waiting for the time to come. When 3 p.m. finally arrived, Jane grabbed her jacket and walked to the park. Her mind was filled with questions. Who would she meet? What was this adventure? Was it a test, a game, or something else? As she approached the park, she noticed it was quite quiet. There were a few people walking their dogs, kids playing, and old couples sitting on benches, enjoying the weather. But no one looked like they were waiting for her, especially not someone who sent mysterious texts. She checked her phone again, just in case there was another message. There was nothing. Jane stood there for a moment, feeling silly. Maybe it's a prank after all, she thought. But just as she was about to turn around and leave, a man in a red jacket approached her. His face was familiar, but Jane couldn't place where she had seen him before. He smiled and said, "Are you Jane?" She nodded slowly, still unsure. "Yes, I'm Jane. Are you?" "I'm Chris," the man interrupted. "I'm your guide for today's adventure." Jane was completely taken aback. Adventure? What is this all about? Chris grinned. "Follow me. You'll see soon enough." He turned and walked towards a nearby bench, and Jane quickly followed. She was both excited and confused. Who was this man? And what kind of adventure was he talking about? They sat down together on the bench, and Chris handed her an envelope. "This is for you," he said. "It's the first clue to the adventure." Jane took the envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was a small map of the city with an X marked in the middle. "Your first challenge is there," Chris said, pointing at the X on the map. Jane looked at the map, her heart racing. This is really happening, she thought. The adventure had begun, and she had no idea where it would take her. But one thing was for sure, she couldn't back out now. Jane looked at Chris, still trying to figure out what was happening. "So, what exactly do I need to do?" she asked, her voice full of excitement and a bit of nervousness. Chris smiled. "It's simple. You just have to trust the map and follow the clues. The first one will lead you to the next challenge. Don't worry, you're not alone. I'll be here if you need help." With that, Chris stood up and pointed toward the street. Jane stood too, still holding the envelope with the map inside. It looked like a normal city map, except for the bold X that seemed to be calling to her. Where was this X taking her? What could possibly be waiting for her at the location? She wasn't sure what to expect, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to just sit around anymore. This was her chance for something different. "Okay," Jane said with a deep breath. "I'll do it. I'll follow the map." Chris nodded. "Good. But remember, Jane, the adventure is about more than just finding the clues. It's about discovering new things about yourself and your world. Right, Jane replied, though she wasn't completely sure what he meant by that. She thought it was just a fun game, not a deep life lesson. She looked at the map again. The first stop was only a few blocks away. Should I go alone? Jane asked, already feeling the adventure calling her. Chris's smile widened. Of course. You'll be fine. The first step is always the hardest. Jane felt a bit nervous, but more excited than anything else. She knew she couldn't turn back now. Thanks, she said. I'll go now. Chris nodded and waved her off. I'll be waiting here for you when you return. Good luck. Jane started walking in the direction of the X on the map. The streets of the city looked familiar, but there was something different about them today. She was walking with purpose, as if she had a mission. Each step felt important. The buildings, the trees, the people passing by, they all seemed to be part of something much bigger now. She wasn't just a regular person walking through her neighborhood. She was part of an adventure. As Jane walked, she tried to make sense of the situation. What was Chris's role in all this? Why was he so confident she could do it? Maybe he had done this before with other people, or maybe he just liked creating mystery. She couldn't tell, but she had a feeling that whatever happened next, it was going to change her. She passed a small cafe and noticed people sitting outside, drinking coffee and chatting. Everything felt normal, but the sense of anticipation grew in Jane's chest. She checked the map again to make sure she was going in the right direction. It looked like she was getting closer to the spot, just a few more steps ahead. As Jane walked down the familiar street, she couldn't help but feel that today was different. Every step felt like part of a secret journey she didn't fully understand. The buildings, the people, even the weather seemed to be part of something bigger. She was no longer just walking down a regular street. She was on a mission. The map said she had almost reached the first location, and her heart was racing with anticipation. Then, just as she turned a corner, she saw it. A small, old bookstore stood at the end of the street. Its faded sign read, "Books and Wonders." Jane stopped in her tracks. She had passed this bookstore many times before, but today it looked different. The door was slightly open, and the faint smell of old paper and adventure wafted out. This must be it, Jane thought, looking at the map again. The X marked the bookstore clearly. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled softly as she entered. The store was dark, filled with the scent of aged books and the silence of a place frozen in time. There was a large wooden counter near the entrance, but no one was behind it. Rows of shelves lined the walls, packed with old books, dusty volumes, and strange trinkets. Jane's footsteps echoed in the quiet. She looked around, not sure where to go next. The place felt like a maze of secrets. As she wandered deeper into the store, she saw an old man sitting behind the counter, hunched over a book. His glasses were thick, and his hair was wild, but his eyes sparkled as he looked up at her. "Can I help you?" the man asked in a raspy voice. Jane paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. I'm here for an adventure," she said, feeling silly as the words left her mouth. "I was told to find a clue." The man's eyes widened, and he gave a small, knowing smile. "Ah, you've been chosen then." He stood up slowly, his joints creaking. "Follow me," he said, motioning for Jane to follow him. Jane hesitated, but then decided to trust him. She followed the old man through the narrow aisles of the bookstore. The shelves were filled with books she'd never seen before. Books with strange titles and languages she couldn't read, books with ancient maps and drawings, and some that looked like they had been forgotten by time itself. The old man led her to the back of the store, where a large wooden door stood. It was old and heavy, and it seemed out of place in the middle of a bookstore. The man took a key from his pocket and unlocked the door. "This is where the next part of your adventure begins," he said. Jane took a deep breath. "What's behind the door?" she asked, feeling nervous but excited. The old man smiled again. "You'll see." He pushed the door open, revealing a small room filled with maps, old scrolls, and strange artifacts. It looked like a secret study. The air was thick with mystery, and Jane could almost feel the stories the room held. On the wall was a large, dusty map of the world, with red marks on certain countries. At the center of the room was a large table covered with books and papers. But the most surprising thing was a chest at the far corner of the room. It looked old, like something out of a pirate movie, with metal clasps and intricate carvings. "That," the old man said, pointing to the chest, "is where your next clue lies." Jane couldn't take her eyes off the chest. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, with its ancient design and mysterious aura. She felt both excited and nervous. "How do I open it?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. The old man smiled again, his eyes twinkling. "The chest won't open unless you solve the puzzle first. The clue is hidden inside, but you must prove you are worthy of it." Jane looked around the room. There were no obvious keys or instructions, just the chest, the map, and a few strange objects. A puzzle? She thought. How hard could it be? The old man walked over to the table and picked up a small, wooden box. It had strange symbols carved into it, symbols that Jane didn't recognize. "This is your first challenge," he said. "Inside this box, you will find the answer to the chest's lock." He handed her the box, and Jane carefully examined it. The symbols were odd, like something out of an ancient language. There was no key, no instructions, just the mysterious symbols. Jane felt her heart race. What if she couldn't solve the puzzle? "Don't worry," the old man said, noticing her worry. "Trust your instincts. You've come this far for a reason." Jane nodded and began examining the box more closely. She tried to press the symbols, but they didn't move. She turned the box around, looking for any hidden clues, but there was nothing. Just when she was about to give up, she noticed something. One of the symbols was slightly raised, almost like it could be pressed. She gently pressed the symbol, and to her surprise, the box clicked open. Inside, there was a small piece of paper with a strange message written on it. The message was simple. "The key is hidden where light meets shadow." Jane stared at the message for a moment. What did it mean? "Where light meets shadow," she repeated quietly to herself. She looked around the room, trying to find a clue. The old man was watching her, waiting. "You're close," he said. "Think carefully. The chest holds your next clue." Jane looked at the chest again, then glanced back at the room. The light from the small window in the back of the room shone on one corner of the room, casting long shadows. Of course, she thought. She walked over to the corner where the shadows were longest and noticed a faint outline of something on the floor. With shaking hands, Jane knelt down and pushed aside the dust. There, hidden in the shadow of the chest, was a small, golden key. "Congratulations," the old man said with a smile. "You've solved the puzzle. Now, the chest is yours to open." Jane felt a rush of excitement as she picked up the key. She had solved the first puzzle, and she was one step closer to unlocking the mystery. Jane held the golden key in her hand, feeling the weight of it. The small, intricate design on the key seemed to glow faintly as it caught the light. It felt like a symbol of her progress, one step closer to discovering the truth behind this strange adventure. The chest, which had once seemed so mysterious and intimidating, now seemed more like a promise. She turned toward the chest, her hands trembling with excitement. The key fit perfectly into the lock, and with a satisfying click, the chest opened. Jane lifted the heavy lid, revealing what lay inside. To her surprise, there was no treasure, no gold or jewels. Instead, there was a small, old book. Its cover was worn and faded, but the title was still visible, The Path to Self-Discovery. The words were written in gold, which sparkled even in the dim light of the room. "This is it?" Jane asked, half disappointed. This is what all the puzzles were for. The old man, who had been silently watching her, nodded slowly. The treasure was never about gold, Jane. It was about discovering something far more valuable. She opened the book, flipping through the pages. Each page was filled with strange symbols, diagrams, and writings. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. But one page caught her attention. It was blank, except for one sentence written at the top. "To understand, you must first believe." Jane stared at the words for a moment. What did it mean? Why was the book filled with such strange things? The old man spoke again. "The book will guide you, but it will only make sense when you truly believe in yourself. Trust your instincts, and the answers will come." Jane's confusion deepened. "But I still don't understand. What's the point of all this?" "The point," the old man said with a soft smile, "is that the real adventure is about discovering who you are. This book will help you find the answers, but you must walk the path alone." Jane closed the book, still feeling unsure. She had thought this adventure would lead to something exciting, but now it seemed like it was asking her to look within herself. "So what now?" she asked, looking at the old man. "Now," he said, "you must leave. The next part of your journey begins when you step outside. Trust yourself, Jane, and you will find what you need." As Jane left the room, she couldn't help but feel a mix of confusion and curiosity. She had come for an adventure, but it seemed like the real journey was just beginning. Jane stepped out of the bookstore into the bright afternoon sunlight. The fresh air felt good, but she couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty that lingered inside her. She had expected treasure, excitement, and answers, but instead, she had found a book and a strange message. "Believe in yourself?" she thought. What does that even mean? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her thoughts. She pulled it out and saw a message from Chris. "How is the chest? Are you ready for the next part?" "Chris," Jane muttered, feeling both relieved and frustrated. "I don't know what to think anymore," she typed back. The chest was empty except for a book, and it doesn't make any sense. The reply came quickly. "You're closer than you think. Go to the fountain in the park. I'll be waiting." Jane sighed. It seemed like the clues just kept coming, but they were leading her in circles. Why a fountain, she wondered. But Chris's message gave her no choice but to follow. Maybe it was just another puzzle she needed to solve. She walked back toward the park, feeling more puzzled than ever. When she arrived at the fountain, there was no sign of Chris. The water in the fountain splashed gently, and the soft sound was peaceful, almost calming. Jane took a seat on the edge of the fountain, waiting. She tried to quiet her mind, but the questions kept coming. Why did I get involved in this? She thought. What is the point of all these clues? What do they mean for me? As Jane sat there, the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the water. It was then that she noticed something strange. Beneath the water, in the reflection of the trees, was a faint glow. At first, she thought it was just the sunlight, but then she realized it was something else, something different. Without thinking, Jane reached into the water and felt around. Her fingers brushed something cold and smooth. She pulled it out, and to her surprise, it was another key. But this key was different from the golden one. This one was silver, with a delicate pattern etched into it. What is this? Jane whispered to herself. She stared at the key, the faint glow still emanating from it. She could feel the weight of it in her hands. This wasn't just another clue. This felt like the real thing. This was the key to the next step. Without hesitation, Jane stood up. "I'm ready," she said softly, almost to herself. Jane stood by the fountain, holding the silver key in her hand. It was cold to the touch, and the delicate patterns on it seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. Her heart was racing, and her mind was filled with questions. What does this key unlock? Where am I supposed to use it? She wondered. She glanced around the park, hoping to see some sign, some clue that would tell her where to go next. The park was quiet now, with only a few people strolling along the paths. It seemed like the world had paused, waiting for her next move. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching from behind. Jane turned quickly and saw Chris walking toward her with a calm smile on his face. "Looks like you found it," he said, his eyes twinkling. Jane nodded, holding up the silver key. "What is this for? What does it unlock?" Chris raised an eyebrow. "Ah, that's the key to the next part of the adventure. But you won't know where to use it until you take the next step." Jane looked at him, confused. "So I just walk around looking for where this key fits?" Chris chuckled softly. "Not exactly. This key will lead you to the next destination, but it's not about finding a door or a lock. It's about your journey, your self-discovery." Jane frowned. "I don't understand. You've been giving me all these clues, but none of them seem to make sense. How does this key help me discover anything?" Chris's smile remained unchanged. "You're asking the right questions. The key is not just a physical object. It represents the answer you need to find within yourself. The real adventure isn't just about puzzles or clues. It's about finding the courage to trust yourself and believe in what you can do." Jane stared at him, trying to understand. She had thought this would be a fun treasure hunt, but now it felt like something deeper. The book she found, the golden key, and now the silver key, it all seemed connected, but in a way she couldn't fully grasp. "Trust myself. Believe in what I can do," she repeated, trying to make sense of his words. "But how? I don't even know where to begin." Chris's smile softened. "Start by asking yourself what you truly want, Jane. The adventure will continue when you take that first step toward your own self-discovery." For a moment, Jane stood there in silence. The park seemed quieter now, as if everything was waiting for her to make a decision. She looked down at the silver key once more and thought about what Chris had said. It wasn't just about finding a physical place. It was about finding something within herself. Taking a deep breath, Jane decided. "Okay," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "I'll try. I'll trust myself." Chris nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "That's the spirit. Now, follow the path ahead. The next part of your journey is waiting." With that, Jane began walking, her footsteps echoing in the stillness of the park. As she walked, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The key in her hand seemed lighter now, as if it was no longer just an object, but a symbol of something much greater. Jane continued down the path, her thoughts swirling. What was she really looking for? Was this whole adventure just about solving puzzles and finding keys, or was there something deeper hidden in all of this? The silver key felt warm in her palm now, as if it was alive with potential. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but somehow, she felt ready to discover it. As she walked further into the park, the scenery began to change. The trees grew thicker, casting long shadows across the path. The air became cooler, and the atmosphere shifted. It felt like she was entering a new world, a world that existed just beyond the everyday. In the distance, she saw a small stone bridge crossing a gentle stream. It looked peaceful and serene, and for a moment, Jane felt as though she was being drawn toward it. Without thinking, she quickened her pace and headed toward the bridge. When she reached it, she stopped and stood at the edge, looking down at the water below. The surface was smooth and reflective, and she could see the sky mirrored perfectly in its depths. For a moment, Jane just stood there, mesmerized by the stillness of the scene. Then, she heard a voice from behind her. "You've come far, Jane." She turned to see Chris standing just behind her, watching her intently. "How did you know where I'd be?" she asked, still catching her breath from her walk. Chris smiled gently. "The path always leads you where you need to go. You've made it this far because you're meant to. But now, the next step is yours to choose." Jane looked back at the water. "What do you mean? I'm not sure what to do next. How do I know I'm on the right path?" Chris's voice was calm and reassuring. "The right path is not always the easiest one, but it's the one that feels true to you. You've learned to trust the clues and trust yourself. Now, it's time to take the next step without fear." Jane stood still for a moment, considering his words. Then, without another thought, she took a deep breath and stepped onto the bridge. As her foot touched the stone, she felt something shift inside her, a sense of clarity, like a door was opening in her mind. She had taken the first step. The adventure wasn't over yet, but she was beginning to understand it. Jane stepped carefully onto the stone bridge. The cool breeze stirred the leaves of the trees around her, and the soft murmur of the stream below filled the air. With every step, she felt lighter, as if the weight of uncertainty was slowly lifting from her shoulders. The silver key in her hand seemed to pulse with energy, as if it were guiding her. She reached the middle of the bridge and stopped, looking down at the flowing water below. The reflection of the trees and sky shimmered on the surface, creating an almost magical scene. She reached into her pocket for her phone, only to realize it wasn't there. "I guess this journey is about being present, not distracted," she thought, putting the phone out of her mind. "You've come this far." Chris's voice broke the silence. Jane turned to see him standing at the entrance of the bridge, his face calm, almost like he knew exactly what she was feeling. "Are you ready for the next step?" Jane nodded slowly. "I think so. I've been questioning so much, but now it feels like everything is starting to make sense." Chris smiled. "Good. The path forward isn't always clear, but the key is in trusting yourself." Jane looked down at the silver key again. It had been with her through every puzzle, every step. She held it tightly, almost as if it were part of her now. "Sometimes," Chris continued, "the next step isn't always the one you expect. But the bridge you're standing on is not just a physical place. It represents a choice, a decision." "What kind of choice?" Jane asked, looking at him, confused. Chris gestured to the stream. "The water flows in one direction, but you can always choose whether to stay on the bridge or cross it, just like the choices in life." Jane's mind began to race. "So, I have to choose whether I move forward or not?" she asked. "That's right," Chris said. "And sometimes, the hardest decision is not knowing exactly what will happen. But you must make it, regardless." Jane felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. What if she was making the wrong decision? What if this journey was leading her into unknown and dangerous territory? But as she stood there, looking at the flowing water and feeling the breeze against her face, she realized that she couldn't stay where she was. She had to keep moving forward, even if it was scary. With a deep breath, Jane looked back at Chris. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Chris nodded, and with a quiet chuckle, said, "Good. Now, take the next step." Jane glanced down at the water once more, took a deep breath, and stepped off the bridge, onto the soft grass that led to a new path. With every step, she felt a little more certain that she was doing the right thing, even though she didn't know exactly where it would take her. She walked down the path, feeling the cool breeze and the weight of the silver key in her hand. It was no longer just an object. It was part of her journey, a symbol of the courage she had to find within herself. As Jane continued down the new path, the surroundings changed. The open space of the park turned into a dense forest, the trees towering over her, casting long shadows on the ground. The air was cool and fresh, but there was a sense of mystery here, as if the forest was alive with secrets. The path was narrow, winding through the trees. Jane's footsteps were muffled by the soft earth beneath her, and the only sounds were the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. It was peaceful but eerie at the same time. She held the silver key tightly, almost as if it were a lifeline. Every so often, she glanced at it, wondering what it could possibly unlock. The adventure felt like it was leading her deeper into herself, and every step seemed to be asking more questions than it answered. A few minutes into the forest, Jane reached a small clearing. In the center was an ancient tree with a thick trunk and long, twisting branches. Its roots seemed to reach deep into the earth, and the branches stretched high into the sky, almost as if they were trying to touch the clouds. There was something powerful about the tree, something that drew Jane to it. At the base of the tree, there was a small stone pedestal, and on top of it, a small lockbox. The lockbox was covered in moss, but it looked old, much like the rest of the forest. Jane took a deep breath and stepped forward, placing the silver key into the lock on the box. It fit perfectly, just as she knew it would. With a quiet click, the lockbox opened, revealing a small, folded piece of paper inside. Jane carefully unfolded it and saw that it was a message. The key you hold unlocks your future. The path is yours to choose. Step forward, and the journey will continue. Jane stared at the message, her heart pounding. She had come so far, but the words were still unclear. Unlock my future? What does that mean? She wondered. As she stood there, holding the message, she realized that the answers weren't always clear. The adventure wasn't just about finding clues. It was about discovering who she truly was and making the choices that would shape her future. Jane stood in the clearing, the message still in her hands. She read the words again. The key you hold unlocks your future. The path is yours to choose. Step forward, and the journey will continue. She looked at the silver key, now resting gently in her palm. It was strange. She had come so far, solved puzzles, unlocked mysteries, and even faced her fears, yet the message in her hand seemed to ask her to make the biggest choice of all. What did it mean to unlock her future? How was she supposed to step forward when she still didn't know where the path would lead? The forest around her felt still, as if the trees and the air were waiting for her to decide. There was a whisper in the wind, like the forest itself was encouraging her to make a move. She took a deep breath, but still, the doubt lingered. What if I make the wrong choice? She thought. What if I'm not ready? As if sensing her hesitation, a soft voice broke the silence. Don't worry, Jane. You already know the answer. She spun around, startled. The old man, the one who had given her the book and the keys, was standing behind her, watching her with a knowing smile. How did you get here? Jane asked, her voice filled with surprise. I've been with you every step of the way, he said, his eyes twinkling. The journey is yours to take, but sometimes we need a reminder that we're not truly alone. Jane felt a mix of comfort and confusion. But I still don't understand. How do I know what choice to make? The old man's smile softened. The journey was never about knowing exactly where you're going. It's about trusting yourself, stepping forward even when the path is unclear. You have the power to choose what comes next. That's why you have the key. Jane looked down at the key again. The weight of it was no longer heavy. It was comforting. The key had been with her through every challenge, every decision. It had unlocked doors, but it was more than just an object. It represented her ability to make decisions, to shape her future. Trust yourself, the old man said again. The choice is yours. Jane closed her eyes for a moment, taking in everything she had learned so far. The adventure had never been about finding answers. It had been about learning to ask the right questions. And most importantly, it had taught her to believe in herself. With newfound determination, she opened her eyes and took a deep breath. I'm ready. She turned away from the pedestal and walked forward, the silver key still firmly in her hand. The path ahead was still unclear, but for the first time, Jane wasn't afraid. She knew that no matter what lay ahead, she had the strength to face it. As Jane walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser, and the air became cooler. The shadows from the branches stretched across the path, casting an eerie, mysterious glow. She didn't know what awaited her at the end of this journey, but the confidence she had gained over the past hours filled her with a sense of purpose. The road ahead seemed to twist and turn, but she kept moving, guided only by the silver key and the words she had read. Step forward, and the journey will continue. Suddenly, Jane came to a stop. Ahead of her stood a large stone archway, covered in ivy and moss. It was ancient, like something from another time. The archway seemed to glow faintly, as though it were alive, pulsating with an energy Jane couldn't quite understand. This was it, the gateway. She hesitated for a moment, looking around. The forest seemed to fall silent, the wind stilling as if everything was watching her. The archway was beckoning her, inviting her to cross into whatever came next. Jane felt a chill run down her spine, but it wasn't fear, it was excitement. She was at the threshold of something new, something she couldn't yet understand, but something she was ready to embrace. Without a second thought, Jane stepped forward. The moment her foot crossed the line of the archway, a soft hum filled the air, and the world around her seemed to shift. The trees, the ground, the sky, they all faded into a blur as if she had stepped into another realm. For a few moments, everything was dark, but then a light appeared in front of her. It was soft and warm, like the first rays of dawn. Slowly, the darkness began to lift, and Jane found herself standing in a vast, open space. The world here was different. It wasn't like anything she had ever seen. There were mountains in the distance, shining lakes that reflected the stars, and fields of flowers that seemed to glow under the moonlight. The air was fresh, and the sky above her was filled with countless stars. Jane stood still for a moment, taking in the beauty and peace of the place. She had crossed into something new, something beyond what she had expected. She wasn't sure where she was, but it felt like home. You made it, a voice said from behind her. She turned quickly, and there, standing in front of her, was Chris. His smile was wide, and his eyes shone with pride. You've unlocked your future, Jane, he said softly. This is where your journey truly begins. Jane stood frozen for a moment, trying to absorb the beauty of the new world around her. The stars above seemed so close that she felt as though she could reach out and touch them. The air was crisp and fresh, filling her with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. She looked around, still unsure of where she was or what had just happened. This place, Jane whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Where are we?" Chris smiled as he walked over to her. "You've crossed the boundary between what you know and what you have yet to discover. This is a place that exists between reality and possibility. Here, anything is possible." Jane glanced around, her curiosity growing. The land stretched out in every direction, filled with lush forests, sparkling lakes, and glowing mountains in the distance. Everything looked like something out of a dream, a place where the impossible could become real. But still, there was so much she didn't understand. "Is this real?" she asked. "Am I dreaming?" Chris shook his head. "This is as real as anything else. But the rules here are different. This world doesn't limit you. It shows you what you are capable of if you believe in yourself." Jane looked down at the silver key still clutched in her hand. It had led her here, but now, it felt like it had completed its task. "I feel like I've unlocked something, but I don't know what yet," she admitted. "Exactly," Chris replied. "You've unlocked the potential inside you. This world, this adventure, is here to guide you, but it's up to you how you choose to navigate it." Jane took a deep breath. She was in a strange, new world, and yet, for the first time, she didn't feel lost. She felt alive, full of possibility, and ready to explore. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, her voice filled with determination. Chris smiled. "That's the beauty of it. The next step is entirely up to you. The adventure never ends as long as you keep moving forward." For the first time in a long while, Jane felt a sense of clarity. She had started this journey unsure of where it would lead, but now she understood. The adventure wasn't just about solving puzzles or finding keys. It was about discovering her own strength, her ability to choose, and the courage to step into the unknown. She looked out over the landscape, a new world filled with endless possibilities. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady and confident. "I don't know what lies ahead, but I'm ready to find out." Jane took her first step into the new world, feeling the soft grass beneath her feet. The landscape stretched out before her, a perfect blend of beauty and mystery. There were no clear paths, no markers to show her where to go next. But that's exactly how she wanted it. As she walked, she felt something shift inside her, a sense of freedom, of being in control of her own journey. The world around her seemed to respond to her movements, as if it were alive and aware of her presence. The flowers bloomed as she passed, and the breeze seemed to carry her forward, guiding her. "This place is incredible," Jane thought as she gazed at the towering mountains in the distance. They were unlike any mountains she had ever seen, glowing in the moonlight, their peaks covered in shimmering ice that sparkled like diamonds. "There's so much to explore," she said aloud to herself. "So much to discover." Chris walked beside her, silent but ever present. It was clear that he wasn't just a guide. He was a companion on this journey, someone who understood the meaning behind every step. "Do you ever stop?" Jane asked, half laughing, half serious. Chris smiled. "Not really. The journey is never truly over. There's always something new to learn, to experience, to explore." Jane nodded thoughtfully. She had learned so much already, but she knew this was only the beginning. She wasn't the same person who had entered the park hours ago, uncertain and questioning. Now, she felt like a part of something bigger, something infinite, and that gave her the strength to keep moving forward. As they continued walking, Jane noticed a faint glow ahead. It was coming from a small, crystal-like structure that stood in the middle of a clearing. Intrigued, she quickened her pace, eager to see what it was. When she reached it, she realized that the crystal wasn't just glowing. It was pulsing with light, like a heartbeat. There was a doorway at the base of the crystal, its edges shimmering with an ethereal glow. "This is it," Jane said softly. "This is the next step." Chris looked at her, his face full of understanding. "Yes, this is your next challenge. The door will open when you're ready." Jane hesitated for a moment, looking at the glowing crystal. What lay beyond it? She didn't know, but one thing was certain: she was ready to find out. With a deep breath, she reached out and touched the crystal. The moment her fingers brushed against it, the door began to open slowly, revealing what lay beyond. As the door to the crystal structure opened, a wave of energy surged through Jane. The air felt electric, alive with possibility. She stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the unknown. What she found beyond the door was beyond anything she could have imagined. The world inside the crystal was a realm of pure energy, a place where the boundaries between reality and imagination blurred. Colors swirled in the air like liquid light, and the ground beneath her feet shifted and pulsed with life. It was as though the very fabric of existence was different here, more fluid, more open. "This place," Jane whispered, feeling both overwhelmed and inspired. "Is this part of the adventure?" Chris nodded. "Yes, this is where your journey truly begins. The choices you make here will shape the next part of your life. The power to create your future is in your hands." Jane took a deep breath, looking around at the surreal beauty of the space. She could feel the power of the place, a power that resonated deep within her. She wasn't just walking through a magical world, she was part of it. She had unlocked the door to her own future, and now she had the ability to shape it. "I'm ready," Jane said, her voice filled with confidence. "I'm ready to create the next part of my journey." With the silver key in her hand and the infinite possibilities ahead, Jane stepped forward into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever came next.